That's how it used to be before Karen decided she was the queen of facultés at Karen. Wasn't just any neighbor, she was the neighbor, the one who appointed herself as the guardian of all things. Petty clipboard in hand, Shep rolled the sidewalks, eyes scanning. For violation, a garden gnome, rageous, a car parked slightly over the imaginary line she had drawn in her head. Unacceptable, she had Alice, and she was checking it twice, except this wasn't. Christmas in Karen was far from Santa I had lived in my home for years, minding my own business, tending to my lawn and generally avoiding unnecessary drama, but Karen had a different plan. She strutted up Tummy driveway, her posture screaming importance, and pointed at my mailbox like it had personally offended her. That's not regulation height, she said, her voice carrying the smug certainty of someone who had appointed her H president. I blinked at her. I'm not in the H. Her expression froze, it waste face of someone whose entire worldview had just been shaken. Like telling a die-hard flat-earther that globes exist for a brief moment, he thought that would be the end of it, that logic would prevail, and she'd move on to measuring someone else's mailbox. I was wrong, because this wasn't just about rules, this was about control, and Karen wasn't about to let a non-member ruin her perfectly curated neighborhood diftras. This was only the beginning. The next day, I found a piece of paper taped to my front door. At first glance it looked official, typed in bold font with phrases like notice of violation and failure to comply, but a closer look revealed the sender. Karen Neighborhoodstons, Representative Neighborhoodstons. Representative, that was an aerial title, not in any legal sense. Eastside, peeling the paper off the door and reading her list of grievances. My trash cans had been left out. 30 minutes too long after pickup. My grass was approximately half an inch taller than it should be, and her personal favorite color of my front door was, in her words, unapproved and disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic. It was beige, some beige that half the houses on Theth Street had. I crumpled the notice and tossed it in the track, assuming that will be the end of it, but Karen wasn't told to let things go that evening. Cher appeared, clipboard in hand, tapping her pen against it. Like a drill sergeant preparing for battle. I noticed you ignored the notice I left. I folded my arms. I didn't ignore it, I read it, then I threw it away. Her lips pressed into Athen line. This isn't optional. If you didn't fix these violations, there will be consequences. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious how far she thought she could take this. She huffed, clearly expecting to back down. Finds possible legal action. I let out a short laugh. Karen, I'm not in the HOA. You have no authority over me property. The sheer horror on her face was priceless. She blinked, rapidly processing my words as if they were in a foreign language. That doesn't matter, she said. Finally, you live here, the rule saply. To everyone I was about to argue with, then I realized something. This wasn't about HOA regulations. It wasn't even about me. It was about Karen's desperate need to feel in charge, to wield whatever tiny sliver of authority she thought she had over the neighborhood. And unfortunately for me, I had just become her newest project. That I could have ignored her. I could have gone about my life pretending Karen and her clipboard didn't exist. But the thing about people like her, they thrive on a lack of resistance. Give them an inch and suddenly they're measuring your gra with a ruler and filing complaints about the shade of your mailbox. So I decided to have a little fun the next morning. Ever painted my front door not neon green as Karen might have feared, but the exact same shade of beige it had been before. Then I printed out a document with an official-looking letterhead and left it in my window. This property is not governed by the H. Any complaints should be directed to the wind. It took exactly 2 hours for Karen to show up. She stood in the sidewalk squinting at my door, then at the sign, then back at my door. She pulled out her phone, snapped a picture, and furiously typed something, probably an email to an imaginary HO board that held emergency meetings just to discuss my property later. That evening I got a text from my neighborton dude. Karen is fuming. She says you are mocking the integrity of the neighborhood. Integrity over a paint color that hadn't even changed. I laughed and texted back, did she measure my grass yet? Oh, she did. I peeked out my window once. Sure enough, there she was standing in my yard, ruler in hand. Dramatical inspect my lawn like a detective at a crime scene. I stepped outside. Karen, do you need help? She jumped. Cautered, handed in her ridiculous inspection. Your grass is longer than regulation height, she snapped. I stared at her again. It in the hoe. She pursed her lips. That doesn't mean you can just ignore community standards. I held back a grina. I don't ignore them, I just interpret them creatively. She stormed off, muttering something about further action. I Had no idea what that meant, but one thing was certain: Karen wasn't done with me, yet word spread fast by the next day the entire street knew about the great HOA showdown between me and Karen. Some people found it hilarious, others were cautiously watching from the sidelines, waiting to see who would come out victorious. Tom, my next-door neighbor, was the first to officially take my side. "Dude, she's losing it," he whispered in spirited. As we stood by our mailboxes, she came to my house last night and told me my porch light was too bright for neighborhood harmony. What does that even mean? Did you ask her? Fourth official lumens limit in the non-existent neighborhood rulebook I juked. "Oh, I did," she said. "Don't get smart with me, Tom. Apparently I wasn't the only one." Karen had been harassing the old couple down the street, got a sternly worded letter about their garden flamingos. A single mom got an earful about her kids leaving bikes in Thedravage, and Tom, he got fined. Yes, fined for having his trash cans visible for more than 15 minutes. After pickup Thebes part, the fine was handwritten by Karen, but not everyone was against her. A small group of self-important neighbors had started backing her up. The ones one nodded furiously at HOA meetings. Theons who whispered about maintaining stands while clutching their organoclats. "She has a binder, man," Tom said, shaking his head. "A binder full of complaints. I nearly choked on my coffee." A binder, she calls it, the neighborhood friends list. This was getting ridiculous. It wasn't just about my grass anymore. It was a full-blown suburban Cold War, and while I had been perfectly fine with passive-aggressively resisting, I realized then that Karen wasn't going to stop until she either broke me or got her way, which meant it was time to escalate. Karen wasn't slowing down. If anything, my refusal to bend to her imaginary rules only made her more determined. The complaint letters escalated. The clipboard became a permanent fixture in her hand, and then in fateful afternoon, she did the unthinkable. She called 911. I was in my backyard enjoying a beer when I heard sirens. Not one, but two police cars rolled up in front of my house. For a split second, I thought something serious had happened, maybe a break-in, an accident, something that actually warranted this level of response. Nope. Karen stood in my driveway, arms crossed, lips pursed in satisfaction. As the officers stepped out, one of them looked exhausted, like he had already decided this was a waste of time. I set my beer down and walked over. "Is there a problem, officers?" One of them sighed. "She claims you're trespassing." I blinked. "On my own property." Karen stepped forward. "This land is governed by the HOA. He is in violation and refuses to comply. If he won't follow the rules, he shouldn't be allowed to live here." The officer rubbed his temples. "Ma'am, we don't handle or disputes. It's not a dispute, it's law," she screeched, waving her ever-present clipboard like it was the Constitution. I crossed my arms, barely holding back laughter. "Officer, on this property I'm not in the H." The second officer glanced at Karen. "Ma'am, ish legally bound to AO rules." "Well, technically I'll know," but the first officer remedy turned to me. "You're free to go." I grinned. "Awesome, since I'm already home, I think I'll stay." Karen's faced her into a shade of red I had previously only seen on malfunctioning electronics, but he's ruining the neighborhood. The officer gave her a long, tired look. "Ma'am, unless he's committing a crime, you can't keep calling the police over personal grievances. That's when it happened, the ultimate moment of defeat." The officer handed her a warning for misuse of emergency services. Tom, who had come outside to watch the spectacle, let out an audible "oh," like we were at a rap battle. Karen stood frozen, her mind clearly short-circuiting at the realization that she had lost, and just like that the tide turned the moment Karen got that warning. Something in the neighborhood shifted. It was as if everyone had been holding their breath, waiting for her to finally push things too far, as she had the police leaving without so much as a second glance at me. Was the first domino to fall. The next was the HOA meeting. Now, I normally wouldn't have bothered attending in home meetings, since I wasn't in Theho, but after Karen's spectacular 911 meltdown, my neighbor Tom convinced me that this particular meeting was worth witnessing. "Sheck losing it, man," Hugh whispered as we walked into the community center. "She's trying to get him to extend HOA authority on member homes for the greater good." It nearly choked on my water. "That's not even legally possible." "Oh, she knows that, but she thinks if she throws a big enough tantrum, they'll just let her do it. And oh boy, did she try." Karen stood at the front of the room, binder in hand, dramatically flipping through pages. Ass ranted about community integrity and unified standards and problematicrescence when she gestured vaguely in the direction I gave Her cheerful with the HOA board members, bless their tired souls, were done. One of them, an older Manuel, looked like he had survived multiple Karens in his.